What up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's your guy, SumnSumnSumn. Hit the keys. Here today to bring you guys a quick little tutorial on EQing and panning and trying to help you guys see it a little differently and see it in a way that makes it simple and easy for you. I did a tutorial similar to this on an MPC Beats video a ways back, so some of you guys may have seen what I'm kind of going to explain to you, but I'm going to go a little more in depth today. So make sure if you guys like this content, you drop a whole elbow on that like button, hit subscribe and that notification bell, because as you know, it really helps the channel. But let's go ahead and get right into this tutorial. Some, hit the key. All right, guys, so basically the way I'm gonna try to explain to you guys EQ is kind of give you a visualization. So we're gonna look at EQ kind of like it's a picture or it's a painting or it's an art or something like that. So when you think about like art, when you draw things all throughout the palette or all throughout the piece of paper in which that you're working on. So like, let's say this right here is our EQ, and it is also, we'll pretend it's a palette that we're painting on, right? So when you paint on the palette, you paint all over the palette. When you're on the palette, you don't just paint in one spot. So if you paint a character here, and then you paint another character on top of that, and then another character on top of that, and then another character on top of that, you know, and you keep painting on top of the same spot over and over and over again, eventually you can't even see the original painting. You can't see any of the green. You can't see any of the original painting. So you need to think about your EQ in the same way. So when you're doing EQ and when you're panning instruments, you have to think about where in the mix that you want your EQ and where you want your EQ to sit and where you want your instruments to sit. So when you're thinking about it, your EQ frequencies go your low frequencies down here, and then your high frequencies are going to go here. Now, the reason why panning is so important with EQ, in my personal opinion, I'm not going to say that, you know, necessarily everybody believes the same things that I believe, but the panning is going to fill out the rest of the spectrum or the rest of the picture. So you have your EQ frequencies, and then you have your panning left to right. So like, let's use this palette as like basically our frequency spectrum. So on our frequency spectrum, we're going to put our bass at the bottom. So our bass is going to eat up all this area right here, right? So, you know, we're not going to have anything else in the bass area. You know, if we put a piano or something in there, we're probably going to EQ out some of the lower frequencies to about 100, 150. So we'll say this bass is everything under 200 or 250. So it's going to fill up all that area in the frequency spectrum. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to have our main instrument. So our main instrument, let's say it's a piano, right? A piano and a voice. So a piano is going to sit right here in the middle of the mix. So it's going to take up this space right here. So now what are we going to do next? We're going to, let's say we find a guitar. So we're going to want our guitar to sit over here in the same frequency range, because it's going to be a mid. It's going to be like a mid-ranged frequency, but we're going to want to pan it to the left a little bit so that we can still see it in the mix. Does that make sense? So we're not covering it up, you know, so it can't be heard. So then let's say we're going to get another instrument. So let's say we want, I don't know, another guitar or whatever. So we got another guitar. We're going to put that guitar over here to the right. So now, as you can see, this is sitting over here in this frequency range. So it's still sitting in the mid frequency range. It's sitting above what would be the lower frequency, and it's not covering up the piano. It's not covering up the electric guitar, and the acoustic guitar is sitting over here fine. So now next, what are we going to do? Maybe we want to put a flute in the beat. So maybe we want to put a flute in the beat. So we're probably going to put the flute somewhere over here in the beat, in the picture. You know, again, we're looking at this like it's a picture, you know, all the frequencies and all the panning and everything. And now we're covering up this part of the frequency spectrum. So now we have, you know, our flute here. So now let's say we want our hi-hats, our snares and stuff like that. So boom, we're going to put our hi-hats and our snares here, maybe some vocals too. So it's going to come down here a little bit, so on and so forth, you know, and then bam, put another instrument right here in our frequency range. So now, as you can see, it looks a lot different than that initial when I just stuck up a piece here, a piece here, a piece here, a piece here, and it kept covering it up because we filled out the whole palette. So when you're looking at your EQ, you want to think about your EQ like that. And that's the cool thing about visual EQ and what they give us now. So let's go ahead and hop into the computer. So I put together a little beat. I'm gonna play the little beat. It's not all the way mixed down, but for the purposes of this demonstration, I just wanted to put something together so you could hear. So I'm gonna go ahead and push play. right, so that's a little beat I got. Basically with that beat, you can hear all the sounds in the frequency spectrum. Because as you can see here, I have them pan left to right. I have different EQs, and this what I want to do today is I want to show you guys some different things about EQ and some different things that happen when you are adding effects. Because just because you EQ something at the beginning of the effects chain doesn't mean that the effects that you put on there doesn't stretch the EQ back out. So let's say you cut something at 200, kilohertz. Well, if you put a flanger or reverb on there or something like that, well, it might stretch back out and pull it to 180, or it might pull it down. It might stretch the frequency range back out. If that makes sense. I guess I can show you better than I can explain to you. So right here I have a piano, and I'm basically just going to pull up this EQ, and I'm going to show you guys what the piano looks like in the frequency range or in the frequency spectrum. So you can see here I haven't done anything to it. It's just a blank palette of EQ. So as you can see, the piano's hitting from here all the way over to here. So it's basically covering the whole entire frequency spectrum, because I have a bunch of different chords and, top melodies and so on and so forth. If you look at the secondary melody, I basically layered it with something else. So I'm going to pull this, what I've layered it up with. I'm going to, and then I'm going to show you that they sit in the exact same frequency range. So let's go ahead and pull this up. And I'm going to mute all these other ones. All right. So if you look at the two frequencies on both of these EQs, you'll see that they sit in the same range. So you're going to hear some of the top end of this, but you're not really hearing all of the mids and the lows in this. So what can you do in order to make the piano stick out more and to make the top melody stick out more? So basically what I have done is I started cutting frequencies. So now we're going to come over here. And so you can see I have cut off all the low end and I've cut off all the high end. Now, I'm not telling you that you always have to do this. This is just a drastic, extreme, I guess, example just to show you guys. So I don't have any of the top end or anything from the piano. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and detach this real quick so it doesn't disappear as I pull up the next one. So bam, I'm going to pop over here. And now we're going to look at this EQ. So what have I done with this EQ? With this EQ, I cut off all the low end because I want it to stand out in the melody. I don't want it to get lost in the 808, and I don't want it to get lost in the piano. So this is what it's going to sound like with the EQ on there now. So now you can hear the piano a little more, and you can hear the separation of the two instruments, even though they are the same pattern, which is pretty dope. And that's what EQ is going to do for you. It's going to make certain things stick out. You can cut certain things out, and you can make certain things stick out, if that makes sense. And so now what I want to show you is something that is very important to take into account and to think about. So when you are EQing stuff out, if you're going to EQ first, or if you're going to compress first, whatever effect that you want to do, whether you're aware or not, I'm sure most of you guys are aware, but I'm just going to say it just in case you're not. However you put these things in the effect chain is the order in which they're going to go. So if you put an EQ first and then you put a halftime on after that, the EQ is not cutting anything out of the halftime. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull up the EQ, both these EQs, and both these EQs are on the same instrument. So I'm going to detach this right here. And then I'm going to also pull this one up. And the bottom one is the same instrument, but it doesn't have anything cut out of it, but it's what is added on after you put the halftime on there. So this is what it's going to look like. So you can obviously see that all these bottom frequencies have come back into the melody. So with this, I actually have the halftime on with the beat the way it's going, and that's kind of why I've cut this frequency up, because like, let's say I wouldn't have cut that frequency out, this is what it would have sounded like. Now with the piano. So as you can see, that sounds like a hot mess. And so all I did was basically to fix that is I actually had cut the frequency higher up in the chain because, I just knew I didn't want it in there. So, now it fits in the mix. And so I'm not telling you that you have to put an EQ on at the end of your chain and cut off a bunch of low frequencies. I'm not telling you how you have to. I'm just telling you this is how it affects it. So I generally don't EQ after I put my effects on. I normally put the EQ on before I put the effects on, and then I have the effects fill out the rest of the frequency range. So then another thing that you need to think about is um, how we normally put distortion on our 808s. Well, putting distortion on your 808 is sometimes what makes your mix sound muddled again. Because when you're looking at this 808, so I'm going to pull up this 808 and we're going to look at it without any kind of distortion on there. All right, and so now this is what it's going to look like with the distortion on there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to detach this again. And I want you to notice how the frequencies there's going to be more high-end frequencies. We want upper harmonics, but we just have to make sure we have room for them in our mix. So what you can do, like let's say you want your 808 to have distortion in it, but you're not necessarily sure how to do it because you don't want to just cut everything off. You don't want all your frequencies to be, just all chopped into little boxes. So you don't want all your frequencies because you don't necessarily want everything to look like this. You don't want everything necessarily to be cut off. So what you can do is just little things like to make room for it in your mix. Just cut off certain areas and make room for the 808. So if you're going to add more upper harmonics, then maybe you need to be making room like right around here, and then boom, it'll clear up your mix just a little bit. So that's something that you have to play with. So I'm not telling you that every EQ is going to be the same because it's not. You have to play with EQ and you have to figure it out. You have to listen. You have to learn how to use it. But this is just basically a quick start to get you going in case you're not sure why your mixes may sound all muddled up or why your mixes may sound muddy. And then keep in mind too, when you're panning instruments, you should pan every instrument because think about this picture that I put up for you a little bit ago. So with all these instruments, it's similar to like an orchestra. So an orchestra, when you look at an orchestra, you have, basically your drums and your piano, and it's going to be in the middle. You're going to have your woodwinds off to one side. You're going to have your strings off to the other side. So an orchestra is the blueprint on how you should set up your beat because an orchestra is basically instruments put in stereo for you. So when you're looking at your panning, you need to think about that also. So like with your panning, you might need to put, I have multiple different hats. So I have one hat to the left a little bit. As you can see, it's panned 6%. I have another hat that's to the right. I have another hat that's to the left. I have another hat that's to the right. Then I have like my snare that's, I have a snare and a clap hitting at the same time. So I have them split. The reason why that's extra important is because if you have everything in the middle, generally your goal is to sell a beat to a rapper. Well, a voice is an instrument too, and there has to be room for a voice on a track. So the voice is going to sit right here. You're not going to be panning voices unless it's a chorus or unless it's like an ad lib. The main vocal is going to sit right here in the mix. So you need to make sure that there's always room for a vocal if you're making a beat for somebody to rap over. If you're just making a beat just for it to be a beat, well then you have more room to not have to worry about EQing and stuff like that. But if you're making beats for rappers to get on, now you're adding another instrument right to the middle. So just think about that when you're making beats, is that you have all these instruments and you have all these things that you need to make room for. Boom, that's what EQ and panning is for. They got you. So make sure if you guys like this content, you drop a whole elbow on that like button, hit subscribe and that notification bell. So every time we bring you guys a new video, you can be the first to find out. Appreciate you guys' time as always, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. All right, guys and gals, thanks for watching the video. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Make sure you hit that notification bell so every time a new video comes out, you can be the first to know. Let me know what tutorials you want to see next in the comments, and see you next time.
Some, hit the key.